I was stationed at a haunted military base in Alaska. What we discovered will haunt you forever. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill shot through me. Felt like ice had invaded my bones. I was stationed at a military base out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by thick snow and relentless winds. It was supposed to be just another day of drills and surveillance, but that day, everything changed. I was nursing my lukewarm coffee, staring at the white expanse outside. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Shadows danced in the corners of my peripheral vision. I convinced myself it was just the flickering lights. But then came the whispers. Low, unintelligible murmurs creeping from the depths of the base. My heart raced. I knew my team had felt it too. We exchanged uneasy glances, hands trembling ever so slightly on our gear as night fell. The dimness swallowed the barracks. Flickers of fluorescent lights overhead hummed like angry bees. It was cold, colder than usual. The chill didn't just creep in, it settled deep in the air, clinging to my skin. I could almost hear it breathing. Then it started. A soft thud echoed somewhere down the hall. I froze. The others were already looking perplexed, straining to hear over the sound of our collective breaths. A chair scraped across the floor, the noise sharp and electric. I hated to admit it, but panic gnawed at my insides. I had to see what was happening. I took cautious steps down the corridor. The shadows loomed taller, darker, as I approached the old storage room. Its door creaked open slowly, as if something were pulling it. I held my breath, peering inside. Dust motes floated in the beam of my flashlight, revealing remnants of old equipment and something else. A distant whispering stirred again, wrapping around my neck like a noose. Not this room, I murmured to myself, but I was drawn in. My foot crossed the threshold. The air shifted, heavy with something that smelled wrong, like rot and decay. Papers rustled on the table, yet I was alone. My heart pounded louder as the whispers grew. A cacophony of voices that felt both there and not there. They poured into my ears, mixing with the scent of dampness and old wood. Panic surged. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me. The sound echoed in the chamber like thunder. I lunged for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I screamed, my voice ricocheting off the walls. The shadows deepened. Something moved in the corner of my eye. I whipped around. My entire body went rigid. A figure loomed. Get out, I thought. My breath came in ragged gasps. Darkness swallowed the light. Couldn't see. Then I heard it. A low growl like thunder rumbling in the abyss. My heart stopped. The whispers intensified, more urgent now. I was not alone. A scream pierced the night. Was it mine? Or was it something else? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness pressed in closer, wrapping around my body like an icy shroud. I fumbled at the door handle again. A hysterical mantra of open, 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 repeating in my mind. It wouldn't budge. The raw terror clawed at my chest, and with the growl still reverberating in the air, instinct kicked in. I searched the room for anything I could use. Something skittered in the shadows. My flashlight flickered, and I caught a glimpse of movement, a cluster of black forms, like spiders. But they were too quick, darting into unseen cracks in the walls. The buzzing whispers twisted around my thoughts, growing louder, more insistent. Words emerged from the chaos. Join us. Stay with us. But I didn't want to join them. I wanted out. In a moment of desperation, I turned to the side wall, eyes frantic. There, protruding from an overhead beam, was a rusty pipe. I rushed to it, my gaze flicking wildly around the room, half expecting to see the figure return. Its presence gnawed at the back of my mind, But the growl had vanished into a chilling silence. Only the whispers remained as my fingers grasped the pipe. A surge of adrenaline flooded my veins. I raised it high, prepared to smash it against the door if I had to. But then, as the air drew still, an unbearable weight descended upon me, forcing me down to my knees. I gasped as the cold met my skin. It felt alive, a sentient force wrapping its fingers around my throat. With a Herculean effort, I stood. My willpower burned in the core of my being. Then, from the shadowed corner, an ethereal form started to materialize, smoke billowing from an origin I couldn't see, spinning slowly into shape. A face emerged, sharp and hollow-eyed, mouth twisting into a grin that radiated malice. The figure reached out to me, fingers elongated and claw-like, clawing toward my neck. I screamed, a primal sound tearing through the thick air. "Leave this place," the entity hissed, words dripping like venom, sending a bone-chilling shockwave through me. The growl returned, deeper now, resonating with a darkness that ignited the very walls. As I backed against the door, I could see the other figures materializing behind it, shadows designed to haunt the very fabric of reality, hungry specters drawn to my fear. I pounded at the door, desperate, but the whispers surged into a wailing chorus, echoing memories that weren't mine. Forgotten soldiers, I saw their faces flicker, twisted in agony and loss, cruel reflections of despair. A crack split the atmosphere as the door shuddered under the weight of the unseen. Suddenly, it exploded open. I fell into the corridor, scrambling to escape from whatever had held me captive within. Darkness swirled, threading through the air like a thick fog that warped my vision. Desperation fueled my legs, yet the hallway stretched out unnaturally long, each step burdened by dread that clung to me like an unseen rope. But the whispers wouldn't let me flee without a fight. My hands brushed against the cold wall, feeling as if the surface pulsated with a heartbeat of its own. I could almost hear it. Stay forever. The shadows morphed around me, becoming twisted faces, mouths contorted in eternal screams, their eyes burning with a malevolence that chilled my soul. "No!" I shouted into the void. My voice was swallowed whole, leaving only my anguished breath in the silence that followed. I pressed on, my mind racing for a way out, but the base felt like an endless labyrinth, shifting and breathing as if it were alive. Then I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps closing in from behind. Whirling around, I grasped for my flashlight, heart hammering, its beam cutting through the murky air. But when it illuminated the corridor, there was nothing there. Only shadows danced menacingly at the edges of the light. As I spun back, a cold grip closed around my arm, tightening like a vice. A shriek escaped my lips, but the sound drowned in the void. I felt my legs go weak as nails broke the skin, piercing into my flesh. Pain blossomed, and as I struggled, the entity emerged from the shadows once more, its grin wider, teeth glistening like shards of glass. "You should have stayed," it rasped, the words winding around me like a vice, dragging me into the eternal dark. The last thing I felt was the darkness pulling me in, deep and unyielding, just as a blinding light flared in the distance, revealing glimmers of hope before snuffing them out. Then silence. And suddenly my scream echoed through the base, but now I was outside. I could see my own form, standing frozen in place, eyes wide with horror. But that wasn't me anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere far worse. Mist washed over the barren landscape like a ghostly veil, crawling through the jagged trees that surrounded the base. I inhaled deeply, each breath feeling like it snagged on invisible barbs. My heart pounded steadily against my ribs, a persistent reminder that I was alive for now. But the unease didn't leave me. It crept closer, whispering slivers of doubt that gnawed at my resolve. My body was entombed within the remnants of the base, and yet I felt powerful claws of a different kind. They grasped at the very fibers of my being, holding me back from doing anything. "You'll never escape." The voice was thick with mirth, laced with the bittersweet inclination of despair. I turned sharply, searching for its bearer, but only shadows melted into shadows, playing a sinister game that taunted my sanity. My own reflected self stood untouched, Yet another ghost imitating my movements but devoid of humanity. I was struck not by the fear of an entity lurking, but by the bone-deep realization that something deeper pulsed behind the veil of the physical. "Help me!" I cried out, my voice a phantom swallowed by the fog. I had no idea who to appeal to. The entire base felt riddled with regrets, the unfathomable wrath of the souls condemned here. It was as if the very earth had absorbed their anguish. The towering walls, once proud sentinels, now loomed over me like ancestral giants twisted by time. They closed in, the space feeling suffocating. Drawing upon rage, I roughed my knuckles against one of the walls. "Let me go!" For a heartbeat, silence swallowed me whole. Then ever so subtly the wall shook. An unseen force rippled across the surface, revealing a network of veins, bright and pulsing like the memories of those claimed. I stumbled back, horrified. Faces cavorted among them, speaking through the echoes of time. Words disintegrated before reaching my grasp. In the distance, I saw movement. Flickering figures emerged along the halls, their limbs splayed in unnatural angles, close enough to recognize the clothing. Fatigue stained by something darker than sorrow, families once whole now rendered decrepit silhouettes. They glanced back at me, their eyes hollow, each gaze a well of despair. Prison wards in this living hell. As I took a step backward, the coldness descended further, coiling around my feet like a serpent. I felt it rising, inexorable and chilling, threatening to swallow me in its depths. The walls throbbed in unison, as if they recognized my fear, each beat reflecting the terror that coursed through me. "Find it! Find the source!" one figure rasped, a hollow echo that seemed to resonate from within the walls. It pointed to a shadowed door further down, a threshold shrouded in mystery. My instincts screamed to turn and run, yet the overwhelming need to uncover the truth clawed at my guts. For better or worse, I couldn't dismiss the call. Something surged forward, a rush of fervor propelled by adrenaline, propelling me into the oppressive darkness that beckoned. I felt a weighty presence shadowing me, its breath brushing against my neck, taunting me with warmth while promising doom. The air grew thick, and as I approached the door, a series of bangs reverberated behind me, urging me forward. Each attempt to look back crystallized my conviction that something loomed beyond the threshold. Waiting, biding its time, that I grasped the handle, steel cool against my palm, and yanked it open. Light flooded in, illuminating a narrow room cluttered with old equipment and stacked boxes. But the flickering bulbs created a strobe effect that only deepened my unease. My heart raced as I stepped further in, hoping to find the answers, praying they wouldn't also lead to my undoing. Then, an artifact caught my eye, a rusted, weather-beaten radio, its glass cracked, emitting static that danced like ghostly whispers. I cautiously approached, breath hitching in my throat. As I fiddled with the dials, a chill rushed through me. The whispered voices intensified, becoming a cacophony of anguish. "She died here. We died here." Suddenly, the air shifted, frigid and stinging. The lights flickered one last time before succumbing to darkness altogether. The whispers turned to wails, rising and falling, merging together, painting an image of loss that tugged at my heart. I stumbled back, but something grasped my ankle, anchoring me in place. I turned, eyes wide with terror, and saw a spectral hand wrapped around my foot, clawed and translucent, its fingers curling like dying leaves. Panic surged through my veins as I thrashed against the force, but it only tightened its grip. With a final desperate struggle, I wrenched myself free, collapsing to the ground. I looked up, horrified, only to see the room change, walls writhing, swelling, collapsing inward, as if the foundations of reality were bowing to an unseen power. As I gasped for breath at the threshold of despair, the whispers ceased, an eerie calm draping over the chaos. It was an invitation, one I could not resist. Then, a voice emerged, soft but penetrating. "Come home." And just like that, the doorway disintegrated into the void, pulling me into the depths of a new horror, inevitable and unrelenting. The last thing I saw before everything became enveloped in black was a flicker, my own reflection, now grotesquely identical to the tortured souls that surrounded me, staring back with hollow eyes, forever lost. The darkness swallowed me completely, a heavy fog of despair that pressed against my chest as if it sought to extinguish the very essence of my being. Time lost its meaning, seconds stretching into infinite uncertainty as a dense silence engulfed the void. My heart thudded loudly in my ears, each beat a reminder of my insatiable fear, a drum heralding the approach of whatever waited beyond the shroud of shadows. Then, a sound pierced the stillness, a distant thumping, rhythmic and unyielding, drumming through the dark like the heartbeat of the bass itself. It grew louder, reverberating from all directions, a malevolent drumroll heralding a grotesque performance. The ground trembled beneath me, a pulse underneath the decaying architecture, setting my every nerve on edge. "Help me!" A voice whimpered, distorted and echoing, merging with the cacophony of dread. It resonated within the confines of my mind, a pleading that clawed beneath my skin, each repetition raking against my sanity. I looked around, but only a swirling blackness met my gaze. It was as if the air had thickened, transforming into a sentient entity hell-bent on ensnaring me. I stumbled forward, guided by instinct, the cries becoming clearer with each shuffling step. "Help us!" the voices harmonized, forming a choir of despair that tugged at my heart, the ghosts of the bass beckoning me to unravel their eternal lament. My breathing quickened, not from exertion, but from the growing realization that I was not alone in this suffocating darkness. Deeper into the void, the pounding grew frantic, shifting from ominous to desperate, each beat mirrored by my own racing heart. Shadows danced, forming fluid shapes that surged toward me without form or intention, just sheer, oppressive presence. I pressed my back against what I believed to be a wall, bracing myself for whatever unspeakable thing lurked just out of sight. But no resistance met my touch. The wall dissolved into what felt like liquid smoke, and I found myself tumbling into a new chamber, this one faintly illuminated by an eerie, phosphorescent glow seeping from the walls. My pulse echoed in my ears as I regained my footing, dread curling like smoke around my lungs. The room smelled of decay, a suffocating stench that twisted my stomach into knots. In the center stood an altar of sorts, raised upon a pedestal, its surface scribbled with incomprehensible symbols that twisted and writhed as if alive. Surrounding it were mounds of twisted remains, decomposing like fallen leaves sorrowfully returning to the ground. I swallowed hard, my instincts screamed to flee, yet I stood transfixed, drawn to the altar's malevolent allure. "Join us," the voices coaxed, soothing and mocking all at once. "Become part of the history, embrace the pain beyond the altar." A dark fissure split through the farthest wall, pulsating rhythmically, a black maw contrasting the almost inviting glow of the altar. An inexplicable urge pulled at me. The air thrummed with energy, each heartbeat synchronizing with that dreadful thumping, compelling me to uncover its source, to dive deeper into this damned labyrinth. "Please don't leave us," the voices begged, and I staggered closer to the altar, the throaty wails mingling in a sea of emotions: anguish, fear, desperation. The whispers began melding into a singular chant, a prayer addressing something far more sinister than I could comprehend. Suddenly, a silhouette emerged from the fissure, a figure cloaked in darkness, its dimensions uncertain but looming larger than life. As it stepped forward, I realized it bore no discernible shape. Instead, it rippled through the air as if drawn from the very fabric of nightmares. My breath hitched, paralyzed by a blend of terror and something akin to fascination. The creature elongated grotesquely, surrounding me in an aura of dread that chilled me to the bone. "You seek the truth," it rasped, each word laced with an ancient malice that burned through my resolve. "But the truth will bind you to their suffering." With one sweeping motion, it raised its hand, and in that instant, the room shuddered, the altar quaking violently as if protesting against the awakening force. Symbols ignited into flames, letters oozing a luminescence that flickered like dying stars, illuminating the tortured faces entwined within the walls. "Join us," it hissed anew, but this time with an undeniable command, forcing my limbs to move seemingly against my will. The cold tendrils of darkness wrapped around my heart as the room collapsed into swirling chaos, the culmination of anguish and despair washing over me as the smiles twisted into grins of utter madness. And just as I felt myself slipping into that abyss of madness, something shattered in the distance. The deafening crack echoed, ripping through the cacophony. A silhouette broke through the glowing chaos, only a heartbeat away from me, desperate eyes glowing within the void. I was not alone, yet the impending realization sent icy dread coursing through my veins. No, don't listen. A voice screamed, the urgency slicing through the darkness. It was all around me, swirling and invading my senses. But before the warning could settle, the spectral hand of the looming entity broke through the veil, dragging me into the gripping shadows, its hunger insatiable, its intent relentless. I stumbled, choking on despair, and then it all disappeared in a blinding flash of white light, a stark contrast to the hell of my surroundings. I thought I'd escaped. I thought I was free. But as the light faded, I opened my eyes to a familiar room, the very room I sought to escape. The army cot, the peeling paint. I lay back in the same bed, surrounded by the same walls I thought I'd left behind. Dread washed over me anew. Welcome back, the creature whispered from the deepest corners of my mind. You belong here, forever. And just as my world cracked again beneath me, the floor opened up like a gaping maw, swallowing everything, my screams, my hopes, my very soul, into an abyss brimming with agonized souls, waiting to welcome me home. The darkness was yet to relent. Those tortured echoes of the past clung to my consciousness as I plunged into an unfathomable pit, gravity itself seeming to relinquish its hold. When the ground met me, if it could even be called ground, I found myself submerged in a world that defied all reason. The familiar shadows trembled and swirled, manifesting into grotesque shapes stretching toward me like fingers of despair. The air was thick with a fetid stench that stung my nostrils, a mixture of rot and something worse I couldn't quite place. As I gained my bearings, I felt the cold dampness seep into my clothes, carrying whispers that tugged at the recesses of my shattered mind. Don't let go, they murmured, their voices coiling around me, suffocating in their intimacy. Stay with us. Remember what we've lost. I stood amidst a tangle of hopelessness, the very walls exuding sorrow, dripping with remnants of what I now understood as countless souls entrapped between the veils of existence. They wore expressions of anguish, their mouths eternally agape in silent screams, eyes wide with terror. Each face was a piece of the history that had been painstakingly buried within the confines of the haunted base, yearning to share their stories but cursed to endure silence. Through that oppressive gloom, a hollow sound filled the chamber, scratching, the sound of something clawing relentlessly against the walls. I turned to face the source, heart hammering in my chest, muscles tensing as the truth crept into my consciousness. Whatever made that sound did not intend to be ignored. With each shuddering breath, the air thickened, becoming charged with an energy that thrummed with agitated intensity. The scratching persisted, a frantic dance of desperation that sent tendrils of dread skittering down my spine. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, blooming like dark flowers across an unseen path, its form flickering in and out of focus. Help me, it rasped, a sound so fragile that it almost shattered the very atmosphere around me. The flesh of its face was stretched tight, hollowed eyes peering from deep into the abyss of its soul. I could see its body twisting, contorting against some unseen force that pulled it forward, only to be slammed back against an invisible barrier, time and time again. Help us all, it pleaded, which churned within me a heaviness so profound, I dared not step closer. Behind this figure, more forms materialized, their shapes indistinct shadows blending seamlessly. The air pulsed with an unbearable grinding noise. It was a symphony of despair, each wailing whisper speaking to some buried truth I dared not confront. What do you want? I found my voice, shaky but defiant, desperate for clarity in this crawling chaos. A tear rolled down the figure's cheek, evaporating before it could hit the floor, the boundary between my reality and theirs. To be free, it replied, a sigh that swept through the chamber, echoing like thunder. But freedom comes at a cost. We need you to pay for our release. At that moment, the ground beneath me vibrated violently, like the clamor of 1,000 voices crying out within the earth, the walls pulsing as if the very 100-year-old structure clung to life. Desperation ignited a spark of frantic energy within me. The warning from that last flicker of light blazed in my mind. Do not listen suddenly. The shadows rushed at me, twisting into grotesque visages adorned with terrifying amalgamations of the dead, a procession of distorted remains whispering and writhing, their hands outstretched in cruel invitation. The drumming of my heart echoed through the chamber, racing with an urgency that threatened to consume me. Then came the noise. The thrumming had transformed, morphing into an unearthly, resonant harmony, a chant that spiraled around me, reaching dizzying crescendos that threatened to unravel my sanity. Join us, become one with the dark, embrace the eternal. I recoiled, memories of the altar flooding back like an avalanche, that growing pulse in the room singing the same twisted lullaby. No! Screamed, clamping my hands over my ears as if to block out the inexorable chant. A violent compulsion began to tug at my core as they beckoned, promising liberation from pain, the very thing I sought since my arrival. Suddenly, as if driven by instinct, I turned and ran. The shapes blurred past me, their tendrils stretching, grasping for my flesh, my spirit, my very essence. I could feel their icy grip trailing dangerously close. Desperation turned to horror as I glanced back, revealing a grotesque tapestry of faces howling in anguish, a surge of harmonizing spirits, chained by fate, their forms flickering like fading embers. Help us! They screamed as I stumbled deeper into the ruptured void. The air crackled with energy, a final rush of gripping cold enveloping my surroundings until, abruptly, the chamber transformed before me. I found myself back at the altar, alone but for the growing shadows circling from the fissure, their essence pulsating, throbbing with malevolent intent. The figure from before emerged yet again. But this time it didn't bear the familiar tattered guise of despair. It stood solid, eyes piercing into my very soul. You chose to face the truth. It hissed, the walls quivering as it spoke. And now you will join us in our torment. Just as I felt the tendrils of their despair curling around my ankle, dragging me into a boundless pit of hopelessness, a blinding light exploded from the fissure, shattering the darkness, illuminating a path away from the helpless souls, revealing a doorway fuming with vibrant colors, animated shadows swirling like frenzied specters beneath its arch. What are you waiting for? The figure screamed, desperation vividly twisting its once familiar features. I hesitated, caught between the clutches of the damned and the beckoning light beyond. Either way, I'd made my choice. But as I took a step towards the doorway, the ground beneath me shook once more, the beautiful glowing light flickered, and a new voice emerged from the void, clearer than the rest, sinister and dark, and it pierced through my heart like a dagger of ice. Welcome to your end. The blinding light surged forward, momentarily engulfing the ghastly figures as I stepped closer, intent on escape. It was as if the very fabric of the room shifted, the oppressive atmosphere giving way to an ethereal glow that whispered promises of safety. Yet behind that brilliance lurked shadows, darker than despair itself, shifting imperceptibly, a unique kind of menace that made the hairs on my neck rise in relentless anticipation. My foot connected with the threshold, and a rush of warmth enveloped me, spiraling through my veins. But a sudden tremor threatened to unfold all hope, a harsh cacophony of laughter rippling through the chamber that grounded me in chilling reality. The figure, now fully manifested, screamed in agony, its visage contorting with a grotesque blend of betrayal and rage. "Fool!" it shrieked. "You believe you can escape? You are ours now." As the room warped and twisted, I was tugged forcibly back, a weightlessness sapping my strength. The pulsating shadows reached for me, claws stretching from the recesses of the void, relentless. They wound around my legs, pulling me toward the altar, now a beacon of dread. As I struggled against the bind of malevolence, the whispers grew louder, a fierce crescendo culminating into a dissonance that shook the very foundations of my sanity. "Why do you resist?" they taunted, laughter echoing with hollow rhythms. "You have seen our truth. You have felt our pain. Do not abandon your brothers and sisters." In that moment, flashes of scenes invocate by the twisted spirits gushed through my mind, visions of sacrifice, betrayal, and broken promises. Soldiers before me, their faces contorted in agony, met both my own gaze and the gaze of the depths of darkness. I felt their chilling fingers beckoning me deeper, urging me to merge into the abyss, to become one with their suffering. Join us. Be the harbinger of pain. The brilliant light flickered dangerously as I fought against its fragile influence. Was it truly a pathway to freedom, or a deceptive trick orchestrated by the malevolent presence looming behind me? Every moment hung heavy in the balance. Adrift in disorienting fear, indecision took root. Then, with a final desperate scream to drown out the corrupted chorus, I ripped my foot from the shadow's grasp, racing towards the light. I could see it now, clear and vibrant, extending like a bridge into the realms beyond despair. Portal to another world. The weight of existence fell from my shoulders as I collided into the luminosity, consumed by its warmth. In that fleeting second, bliss swept over me. This was freedom. Or so I thought. As I broke through, the joy turned violently cold. I staggered out of the brilliance only to find myself thrown into an alternate realm, a darkened void lit by the dim gasping of the tortured souls who had once called me comrade. The shadows danced around me, their faces now clearer, revealing features I had known before the base had swallowed us whole. Fellow soldiers, their features enshrined in grief, stared back, eyes sunken yet filled with a piercing intensity, an unending thirst for revenge. You were not meant to leave, one of them spoke, the voice like shattering glass. You are part of us now. Dread pooled deep within, a suffocating weight as I reeled, the realization carving a hollow space in my chest. The shadows surged hungrily at me, a tide of anguish and rage cascading together, drowning hope as it licked hungrily at my frame. There will be more for you to share, they hissed, their words dripping with sinister delight. More memories to forge and horrors to feast upon. Just then, I felt the floor tremble beneath me, the very ground alive with a pulsing rhythm, and the air thickened with their desperation. It thrummed like a heartbeat, resonating through the collective loss of life that permeated this cursed place. Then, in a cataclysmic eruption, the shadows fused, the wall of darkness shifting as a massive, swollen face formed from its depths, a beast of despair with gaping maw and swirling eyes wrought from the souls it had consumed. Welcome back, it rasped, a vile grin stretching across its horrific countenance. Now we can finally share the joy of eternity together. And as laughter echoed through the void, the shadows pulled me closer, sealing my fate in their grasp, while a familiar yet haunting voice whispered from the dark behind me. You thought you could escape, but the altar remains hungry and it craves your sacrifice. The laughter faded, swallowed by the suffocating silence that blanketed the void. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as the grotesque face loomed closer, pulsating with a grim energy, its eyes swirling with the anguish of those it had consumed. The shadows twitched, a writhing wave of darkness with a singular appetite for devastation, and with trembling hands, I grasped at the air, desperate for any glimmer of escape. Time lacks meaning here, the beast crooned, its voice a cacophony of grief and madness, scraping against the edges of my sanity. Each soul lends its memories to my nourishment, and soon you will join the feast. It opened its maw wider, revealing a chasm that pulsed with the ghastly light of lives extinguished. Vivid images spiraled within it, scenes of betrayal and horror playing like macabre theater. Desperate yet enraged, I screamed against the onslaught of despair. I would not be like them, not yet. In that moment of defiance, I focused on every fragment of fear, summoning the urges to fight the instinct that had once driven me to survive through the darkest trenches. Let me go, demon, I roared, but my voice echoed, swallowed by the oppressive shadows. Let go? The beast's laughter clawed into my mind. You will learn to embrace the darkness, just as they did before you. As I stood my ground, the shadows shifted again, the spectral figures of my comrades swirling around me, a grim procession of the fallen, their faces contorted in agony and unquenchable vengeance. They reached for me, their hands now sharp as claws, nearly translucent, yet laced with a palpable fury. Join us, brother, they wailed in unison, a symphony of torment that sent shivers down my spine. The altar awaits your service. We were bound by blood and now, you will become one of us. The echo of their words bore into my mind, a dragging whisper, relentless. I struggled to push through the cacophony, the need to remember who I was crashing atop the suffocating dread. Their lives had become a nightmarish tapestry woven with despair. I had seen the faces of their betrayal, had witnessed the darkness engulf them as they gave themselves willingly to the altar. But there was a flicker, a thin wisp of resilience lodged within my heart. If I had found this cursed sanctuary, then perhaps there was a way out. My breath quickened, coursing through the tangles of tendrils around my limbs as the fear clawed at me. But I pushed back. No, I will not be part of your wretched feast. The air crackled as the shadows recoiled ever so slightly, a moment of hesitation. I seized the opportunity, focusing every inch of defiance into my fist, and without warning, I surged forward, breaking through the thrumming tide with desperate fury. With a primal scream, I rammed my shoulder into the massive face of the beast, sending ripples through the amassed shadows. In its depths, the faces of my brothers flickered. Shock replaced vengeance. Confusion washed over their ghostly visages. I could feel the energy of the void pulsing around me, surging in response to my anger. For an instant, I glimpsed a rift, a crack in the web of darkness formed by my defiance, revealing a glimpse of a past life, sunlit landscapes, laughter, fleeting moments of friendship. The shadows seethed, roaring in anger as I pushed further into the rip, heart racing against the odds as the darkness retaliated, grasping desperately at my limbs. Leave now, and we will strip you of your memories. The beast howled, rage spilling forth with a force that whipped around me like a tempest. With every ounce of strength, I wrenched my arm free, breaking through the threshold of the void just as the shadows lunged at me with ferocious speed. I stumbled, breathless, as I broke into the faint glow of the warped light that mulled just outside their reach. But something was forgotten. In my flight, I felt a tether snapping, the senses of those I had fled still anchored to me. Wisps of sorrow entwined within my thoughts. And then, as the shadow screams faded behind me, the ground beneath quaked violently, and I was struck with a sudden realization that sent ice through my veins. They had not let go. As I collapsed into the luminous light, dread pooled like molten lead in my gut. I was no longer alone. A chilling awareness pricked at my consciousness, a presence swung dangerously close, its breath hot and bitter against my neck. "What have you done?" whispered a voice barely above a breath, filled with equal parts sorrow and wrath. I turned slowly, and dread coiled around my spine at the sight that awaited me. A figure, gnarled and draped in shadows, bore the rags of a soldier from my past, eyes glowing with a feral hunger, and in its skeletal hand, a piece of the altar glinted ominously. "The altar craves your sacrifice, and it shall not wait." The shadows surged in response, howling like a ravenous storm as they thrummed in unison behind him. And just as I thought to escape the darkness that wrapped around my heart, I was again ensnared, captured by the malignant grip of a never-ending nightmare. "What will you give, soldier?" it hissed. "What shall you sacrifice to save your soul?" And before I answered, I felt the ground begin to rumble beneath me. The altar stirred, alive and hungry, its grasp more binding than ever before. The altar's pulsations grew louder, the echoes of its heartbeat resonating through the very marrow of my bones. The soldier's skeletal grin widened, revealing rotted teeth that glimmered with malice as he stepped closer, each movement fluid yet jerky, an abomination summoned from the depths of the void. His gaze pierced through me, a familiar darkness flickering in those hollowed eyes, a reflection of the insanity I had barely escaped. "Your friends are not lost to you," he crooned, gesturing languidly to the swirling shadows behind him. "They are here feeding. They have made their choices." With a wreath of laughter that chilled my blood, he continued, "But you are still so deliciously naive." My pulse quickened as his words burrowed into my mind, summoning images of laughter hollow, twisted, and distant memories of camaraderie shared in the dark alleys of our base. Their faces emerged between the shadows, their expressions ranging from despair to wrath, blended into a grotesque symphony that urged me to join their suffering. We were bound by blood. The collective whisper brushed against my skin, feathers of freezing dread tickling my senses. "Come back to us. Embrace your sacrifice." I choked back a scream, not wishing to give in to the siren call of despair. No, I had tasted the sweetness of freedom, the essence of life that lay beyond the altar's ruthless embrace. I turned abruptly, eyes scanning the darkness for an exit that would unravel this twisted reality. Reality, however, had spiraled beyond my control, and with every breath, I felt the shadows encroaching, tightening their grip like a vice around my throat. "Leave him," the skeletal soldier snarled, his hand raised toward the shadows as they paused momentarily. "He belongs to the altar now." Their disembodied hands twitched as they faltered, but the insatiable hunger surged through me, a reminder that to turn away now would plunge me into a void with no return. "What do you want?" I spat, desperation clawing at my throat as I fought against the tide of the past. "Your fear is our currency," he replied, sneering through cracked lips, "but what matters more is what you hold dear." He leaned closer, and my stomach twisted with revulsion as I fought the urge to recoil from the stench of decay. "A cherished memory, a lost friend. All you need do is barter." The shadows danced and writhed behind him, beckoning, whispering, coiling tighter around my mind. Only now did I see how many spirits hovered in their midst, fellow soldiers who had been swallowed by the altar, their faces fading in and out, haunted echoes swirling within the hungry darkness. A voice I recognized broke from the masses, twisted by madness. "You cannot escape us. We will devour him too, just as we devoured you." Bracing myself against the mounting dread, I pictured a happier time, slick with nostalgia, the day when we had stood side by side, our laughter ricocheting off the frost-kissed trees, our camaraderie a bulwark against the horrors of war. The faces of my comrades danced like phantoms against my eyelids. Would they come to my aid if I called? Could I invoke their spirits to free us both? No, I seethed defiantly, the defiance strengthening, the resolve proliferating in my chest. The moments stretched endlessly as I felt my memories tethered to those dark shapes behind me, begging me to take a step back into the abyss. "I will give nothing," I breathed, my voice barely rising above a whisper, yet firm enough to tremble the darkness. But the shadows rippled, summoning more grotesque shapes eager to claim me. The soldier's eyes shimmered with fevered rage. "Very well. Then you shall witness their hunger." And in that instant, the shadows ceased their dance, pulling back to reveal a horrific tableau. My comrades were no longer hidden victims. They stood before me, corrupted remnants of their former selves, eyes glowing with the insatiable void of hunger. Each face was marked by a betrayal deeper than the flesh. They had chosen to serve the altar, and now they advanced, limbs quivering with anticipation of the feast that awaited. I triumphed inwardly, trying one last push. "You traded your soul for this, and you think I will do the same?" The soldier laughed, a sound riddled with fragments of sorrow and despair. "You underestimate the hunger." Suddenly, as if on cue, they lunged, their faces twisting into a grotesque spectrum of emotions: rage, madness, and a hunger so profound it threatened to consume the last fragments of my will. I stumbled backward, panic gripping me, and tripped over the altar's edge, sending a tremor of shock through the risen platform. A resonating sound filled the air, a choir of agonized souls echoing my growing horror. The altar quaked, the demonic energy swirling, and with a final blink, the piercing light flickered, revealing a path of grotesque possibilities. But the shadows lunged, their claws stretched in cruel anticipation, and as they encircled me, the last thing I heard before succumbing to the darkness was that infuriating whisper from the soldier. "What will you sacrifice, soldier? Time is running out." And with that, the altar erupted, a monstrous hunger filling the void as the shadows descended, obliterating everything in their insatiable quest for one more soul to devour. The shadows swallowed the last remnants of my defiance, wrapping around me like a black shroud. Each tendril was alive, pulsating with malevolent energy as if the void had grown sentient, reveling in my fear. The skeletal soldier's laughter echoed in my head like a cursed melody, chasing me into the chaotic depths of the darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for the nothingness to swallow me whole, but the abyss was hungry for more than mere oblivion. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself suspended in a liminal space, both here and not here. The altar loomed large, its grotesque shape pulsating like a wounded creature, leaking a viscous darkness that seeped into everything: my skin, my veins, my very soul. Above me, the once familiar ceiling of the military base twisted into a nightmare realm, shifting with each breath, revealing glimpses of shrieking faces trapped within the wood and concrete, their mouths twisted in silent screams of anguish. "Welcome back to the fold," chimed a voice, honey-sweet yet laced with venom. I turned, dread pooling in my stomach. The soldier was there, but now he was no longer alone. Figures began to materialize around him, grotesque marionettes fashioned from despair. They were the lost ones, my comrades, and yet something was dreadfully wrong. Gone was their joy. Instead, despair twisted their features into mocking masks of hunger. "Don't you see?" One of them, a former friend, stepped forward. Sergeant Lee. His vibrant smile lay grotesquely inverted. The grin stretched too far, too wide. "We have embraced our nature. The sacrifice is liberating." A flood of recognition washed over me, mixed with visceral repulsion. "Lino, you were always fighting back. You promised." He echoed, his voice a chilling mockery of the past. "Look around. We've been freed. We are perfect now, able to feast on fear, pain. After all, isn't that the essence of survival? This is our destiny." The words reverberated through my mind, mingling with the howl of the wind outside, the desperate cries of creatures unseen. Each of them, my friends, stood poised to join the gruesome ritual, eyes narrowing with predatory excitement as they advanced. I gasped and stumbled back, the altar vibrating underfoot, awakening dark memories buried deep within the recesses of my mind. I glimpsed us, all of us laughing around a campfire moments before we were plunged into a war that had turned us against each other, against ourselves, tilting on the precipice of annihilation. But now, that laughter had dissolved into a haunting symphony. A face dimmed by shadows emerged, a fellow soldier I had thought lost forever. "Davis. Look how we've grown," he bellowed, his voice thick with hunger. "Why fight it? Join us. Embrace the feast." "No," I screamed, my words drowned by a cacophony of shrieks rising from the shadows still coiling around me like serpents, hungry for my essence. I refused to live this nightmare. They halted momentarily, their expressions morphing, faces flickering like candle flames in a storm. The soldieress laughter rose again, relentless, intertwining with the monstrous choir of tortured souls behind him. "Flee if you must, but where will you go? You'll always return to feed the altar." Overcome by desperation, I turned, my instincts igniting as I sprinted away from their gnarled talons, pushing through the thickening darkness. The altar tremored once more, groaning under the weight of the souls it claimed. Behind me, the shadows hissed, a mocking chorus egging me on. I found a narrow passage, walls slick with a strange substance that pulsed with the altar's heartbeat. Euphoria flooded my senses, a false promise of escape lined with despair. The air thickened, heavy with whispers, growing ever more distinct echoes of ancient incantations, ritualistic chants that gnawed at my sanity. "Come back, prisoner. You are ours," they urged, their voices merging into a symphony of insanity. Panic surged as the darkness cascaded behind me, scrambling through the passage like a maddened beast. Slivers of distant light flickered ahead, grotesque illusion that seemed to draw me deeper into the madness. In a fevered push, I broke through, bursting into a wider room, only to find myself confronted with a sight that etched horror into my very bones. The walls were lined with faces, fingers pressed desperately against the surface as if trying to escape their prison. Some were familiar, others unknown, their eyes wide with terror, mouths frozen in screams. It was a macabre gallery of the lost, each face twisted in eternal agony, a testament to those who had faced the altar and succumbed. Suddenly, I heard their cries. "Free us, or we'll take you too." The voices melded into a singular wail, a cacophony vibrating against the air, heart racing. I spun around, desperate to find another way out. But there was no way to escape the grotesque artistry of despair that was swallowing my retreat. the shrieks clawing at me, demanding attention, and in that moment, the skeletal soldier loomed behind me, exuding an aura of triumph. "Time is indeed running out," he whispered, the shadows swirling dangerously close. "But you have a new choice to make, join them or suffer worse." The whispers intensified, rising to a deafening roar as I realized I was trapped not just by my own horror, but by the specters of those I had once called friends. The shadows surged forward, reaching, clawing, hungry for what remained within me. And just as I turned to run, my foot caught on a body, collapsing to the cold ground. I looked up, and one familiar face stared back at me, distorted but unmistakable. It was Davis, eyes hollow, lips curled in a rotting grin that whispered my doom. "You should have fed the altar before I could scream." A darkness beyond comprehension enveloped me, a harrowing laughter echoing as I was drawn into the maw of the void, racing further into the abyss, my fate now bound to those cursed souls who had awakened to hunger. Just then, the altar trembled violently, and the wall of faces screamed in unison. One final thought raced through my mind, an echo of my own heartbeat merging with the pulsation of the altar. What have I done? And as awareness faded, the darkness swelled, and the last flicker of light blinked out, leaving nothing but an endless silence. I remember the moment I awoke in that forsaken place, the sense of wrongness permeating the air like a heavy mist. Time had lost all meaning, and with every heartbeat, the abyss tugged at the fraying edges of my sanity. I was trapped in a loop from which there seemed to be no escape, bound by the chains forged from my own fear and despair. That I stood alone in the center of the altar room, its surface fracturing under the weight of countless sacrifices, the remnants of those consumed whispering tangentially in a cacophony of lost voices. Memories flickered in and out of my consciousness like a dying flame, the faces of my comrades twisted and distorted, begging for release, caught in the horrors of their own choices. As my eyes scanned the grotesque writhing patterns of the altar, I felt the unmistakable pull of its dark energy once more. It thrummed and pulsated, its hunger insatiable. I staggered back, memories of their faces, their pleas, resonating in my mind. "Join us, embrace the feast." The visceral need to escape surged within me, urging me to confront the truth I had so desperately tried to ignore. But every time I thought I was moving forward, some unseen force yanked me back, drawing me deeper into the dark tendrils of fate that tangled around my soul. That familiar voice called to me from a distance, the skeletal soldier. Laughter malignant. "You still believe you can escape the altar? It knows your fears, your guilt. It thrives on them." And suddenly I understood the darkness that engulfed me. It wasn't merely an entity. No, it was a living history, feeding on the stories of the fallen. Each soldier, each face etched on the walls had once been someone who made the same choice or failed to choose it all. They had surrendered their humanity to the altar, and in doing so had given life to the horror that now ensnared me. "Join us," the voices chorused, their collective anguish threatening to drown me. "Become part of our tale." "No," I shouted, my voice forging a barrier against their insidious whispers. I tried to summon the resolve to fight back, to insist on my presence not as a soul to devour but as a survivor. Yet, the altar's unbearable pull tightened its grip, coaxing me to join the festering amalgamation of despair. That it was then that I felt the sharpness of clarity slice through the haze, and understanding crystallizing in the depths of my heart. They were not seeking my soul alone. They were seeking my memories, the parts of me that had once conquered mountains and sustained bonds of brotherhood. The altar craved the essence of shared experiences, the shared torment of our existence as soldiers, and the fragility of humanity itself. I thought of my comrades once more, the laughter we shared, the sacrifices made, the bond of brotherhood forged in the darkest hours. I would not let their suffering be in vain. They deserved to be remembered, to live in the light, not in the shadow of this cursed altar. With a roar that reverberated through the void, I summoned every piece of strength I could muster, fueled by the memories of those I had lost. "You will not consume me. You will not take them." I thrust my hands forward, banishing the darkness that clawed at my skin, my voice surging with the weight of those unyielding spirits. The altar trembled, the darkness recoiling momentarily as if stunned by the fervor of my defiance. "No," You cannot deny your destiny. The soldier screeched, shadows swirling like a tempest around him. In that pivotal moment, I realized there was one thing I could sacrifice. Not my spirit, but my own sense of self, the haunting memories that anchored me to this place. The weight of sorrow, regret, and failure surged within me, spilling out like ink across the altar. I cast my memories into the broken altar's maw, merging them into a dark tapestry of pain, transforming what should have consumed me. Suddenly, the shadows converged in a chaotic frenzy. As I felt the pull releasing its grip, the altar consumed with my memories now swarming like lightning in a storm. Each recollection burst forth, illuminating the darkness, revealing the faces of my brothers no longer wrathful but smiling, their joyous laughter echoing through the void, rising like a phoenix from the ashes. I remember you, I breathed, tears streaming down my face, the light surging, drowning the darkness in a warmth I had long forgotten. I carry you with me, but as the brightness engulfed me, a horrifying realization crashed down. I had sacrificed my own memories, my very essence, leaving a hollow shell in their place, one that would serve the altar for eternity. Futures unmade and lives unlived flickered before me like fading embers. I'll remember, I cried, thrusting every last vestige of love, camaraderie, and moments shared into the unfathomable depths. And in that final act of rebellion, the darkness roared, fraying at the seams, spiraling uncontrollably until the altar shattered into 1,000 glittering fragments. The world around me erupted in light, searing through the desolation as the lost souls were released, swirling upward in a storm of illumination, their faces finally at peace. This time I would not forget. I had been reborn in their freedom. Yet I soon realized as the brilliance faded, I did not return to my own life. I opened my eyes to the familiar barracks. The icy breath of the Alaskan air chilled me. Only this time, I was alone. The military base loomed silently, an uninviting guardian of the dark, a space forever altered. But then, the whispers returned, low and insidious. You are ours always forever, and I understood. A chilling dread settling in my bones. The sacrifice I made meant I was neither here nor there. An echo forever seeking the warmth of lost lives, doomed to roam the haunted remnants of a place where evil had festered. As any choice haunted my mind, I knew that not all shadows were vanquished, and the altar still craved sacrifice, a hunger, now aligned with my own. What had I become? What awaited me if I ever hoped to escape? But I had lost my memories, and all that remained was darkness, quietly, patiently, waiting. And as I turned to exit the barracks, something more sinister swept through the air. Where will you go? We are eternal.